cleaner lead us in the pledge, please.
On to the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Well, welcome everybody to the first Finance Committee meeting of the new group. I can get started here. Anybody have any items they want to add to the agenda at this time? I've got 2 or 3 things we'll probably add on at the end.
Chairman, I'd like to add, I'd like to see some different reporting with our items, if we could. I'd like to, I don't know if you want to discuss it now, but I'd like to see us change a little bit of that, if we could. You want me to go into detail now, or?
Let's save it for other items. We need to make sure we get it on the agenda so we don't lose it. And I've got a couple of things which has, it may be what you're referring to as some facility related operating expenses to look at where we are cost wise and operationally on some of the facilities. Annette, she had a doctor's appointment and she's coming, and she wanted to make some comments and some questions about some funding for our high school science clubs. So we'll address those in other items, and I guess that's about it. So Brad, you usually lead us through this thing, and we've got our sales tax report, which is in the packet. We want to touch on it first, just to kind of get it out of the way, and then you can start through your general fund financial. Yeah, I read that.
Well, let's see. There we go. Zoom in on here. So, and this, of course, is item number 3 on BOE Connect. So, normally I try to have this stuff on there at least 5 days ahead of time, but I didn't know till Thursday that we were meeting today, so that's why it wasn't on there 5 days ahead of time this time. So, but going forward, we'll know in advance. But so August, this is the last 25 years or so of the month of August. Of course, all we care about is this. But notice the increase, $155,000 more in sales tax this August than we had last August. That's a big sigh of relief, for real there, because this is from June, which still's in the middle of COVID. So the fact that, and last month you can see we had a $51,000 increase for the month of July. So starting out good, $207,000 ahead, which I don't want to say we got $207,000 we can spend, because remember we budgeted $3.4 million to come out of our fund balance as a deficit, and we have about $660,000 of revenue that we thought we were going to get when we did the budget that we're not going to get. So we're really starting out $4 million in the hole from that perspective. So just keep that in mind. But nonetheless, very positive start for the first 2 months in sales tax. We kept the budget the same. The county, of course, carried that budget, told us to carry that budget forward at 15.6. We ended up coming in at 16.025. So all things being equal, we're 200,000 ahead of last year. We could be coming in at 16.2 million, right now, all things being equal. But we'll see how it plays out over the next 10 months. So that is our sales tax overview for the month of August. Down here at the bottom, Whitney, you probably are not familiar with this one yet, but at the bottom, this is just simply a percentage. It's just an extra accounting documentation. So this 9.561% just simply means that this amount represents 9.561% of the budget for this year in that 1 month. And that'll build as we go across here. So we're already 18.461% of our budget collected in the first 2 months for FY24. Anything else, Mitch, before I go on to the next item? We'll jump into the general fund financial statements, and at least for this meeting, I've just kept the same format that we've used it since it was actually in place before I came, and I was never asked to change it, so I've just carried it forward. So we go into this narrative report, which really gives you the revenue breakdown and a description, if necessary, if relevant. There is a revenue report, Mitch has already asked me about, that I can print out. It won't have my writing in it, but it'll give you the same numbers as well. But I assume Mitch will want me to start bringing that instead, or maybe in addition to, I guess we'll be talking about that a little later. So, Skyward revenue report. So I'll just jump right in and go to the highlights. I'm not going to read every one of these lines. This has been online, but you can see the current property tax. This is one of, I call them, big three revenue sources. We don't usually get any of this in the month of August, so we didn't get any consistent with last August. Some of these smaller property tax amounts, prior year, you can see $59,339 in this 40120, and that's really consistent with last year, about 1,200 more. I won't again read all these small ones that you have on there, but still consistent so far with the prior year largely. And this one, 3,000 more than the prior year, but again, smaller amounts. Insurance penalty and tax delinquent, you can see 10,000, that's in line with last August, within $435. Here's the sales tax we just talked about, detailed out on there, at $155,000 more than last August. The business tax, and I'm going to assume this is more of a timing, Mitch, unless you have another opinion. We got 15,006 in the month of August. That's 8,500 more, so it's a significant amount more. But we just get that flowing through the trustee's office. I have to assume that's a timing difference. Do you have anything else to add?
It's the local businesses filing the business tax returns, and they were deferred. Same thing when you get down to I don't know if you got it, but the income tax is similar in a similar boat. Those are just state dates and the filing of them, and so you're at the mercy when they come through the state, from the state to the trustee and then back to the school.
Yeah. Same thing probably with the mixed drink tax. It's nearly double of what it was last year, but probably a timing issue there as well. This marriage license is always real small like that. Now the community service, SAC, school age child care, this is still low because of just the effects of COVID and opening schools back up. 36,007, that's 11,000 less than last August, but again, that's just got to do with the schools being closed still, not at full speed.
Wasn't some of that CARES Act money taking care of the kids for essential employees and stuff? I mean, is that going to be deferred to be paid later, or what on that, Brad?
I don't, and Dr. Flannery, you got to correct me if I'm missing. I haven't received any notification we're going to get any CARES money specifically for SACC. We have the ESSER grant.
Not through the school system.
Okay.
It'll come through county and Johnson City government.
Okay.
If it happens.
Okay.
Which is, I'm not real sure.
Okay. Interest earned on deposits. This is something, Mitch, maybe you can answer. This one's a lot less than it was last year, and this is all last year was a lot more. 7,300 this month compared to 16,000 last year this same month. Anything you would add to that?
It's just an allocation that the trustee makes of the total interest he earns in each of the months back to all the different funds based on their relative fund balances. So, all I could suspect is he had maybe some CDs or something that came due last year.
That revenue line item last year over doubled what we expected, so that was good last year. This insurance recovery is partial payment for gym floor damage at Gray Elementary School. So that job's going to end up being around 145-ish, so the insurance company is reimbursing the rest of that as well.
It's not this time. all the amounts I'm gonna give at that time, is that right?
Well, at first, that's all they approved.
Right.
And then, the job was gonna be about $145,000, that was resubmitted, and they agreed to pay the rest.
Okay.
Mr. Fleener, they're actually gonna deduct $14,000 for depreciation, so we've gotta come up with 14. I'm gonna ask HEW to pay that much. If any luck at all, the board won't have to come up with a dime.
Okay.
Sale of equipment, that was just 5 very old school buses that was sold over gut deals. And
$600 a bus.
roughly, yeah, that's, let you know next time you can bid on one if you'd like.
No.
And when I say old, we're talking 15+ years old, 200,000-300,000 miles, I mean, so they're real old. Those are. Facilities rentals, we haven't been doing because of COVID, so we didn't have any revenue for that, where last year we had about 13,000. Sometimes the Pepsi revenues can come in there too, but we just didn't have anything this month for it. This revenue royalties, there's been some questions about this, so I'll go ahead and talk about bus advertising. This is where it normally would flow through if we get revenue. Of course, in August, you typically don't have that because it'll be for the month before, so buses don't run in the summer. But when we get it, this is where it flows through.
So what is Dr. Flannery, you can probably answer this. Seems like we had a discussion in an earlier board meeting about advertising revenue for the website.
Yeah,
So is there any update on that?
I don't know if we've got a check yet or not. You know, Brad?
Not for website, we have not. We did just get one today for normal bus advertising.
Okay, that is the website.
Okay, so that is the website. 'Cause
Yes,
we
sir.
got a check today for the bus advertising.
Was it
right?
pretty much normal then?
It had the bus advertising attachment with it.
Well, since the buses weren't running, the company agreed to let the online ads count for that, and the advertisers were okay with that.
Okay.
And we're kind of leaving that alone, even though we're running buses again, just in case we won't at some point in the near future. So bus ads, apparently the money's flowing again. I didn't know that.
I didn't see the check. Do you remember how much it was today?
$25.99.
So that is consistent with what it's been being, 25. So, because it had increased from averaging about 2,000 for 10 months to getting close to that 2,500 mark
Good
before.
news.
So that's pretty close to being in line. I think the highest it might have got was close to 3 one month last year.
So we'll see that bumping back up in September. then.
Yeah, you normally don't see it in August anyway, July or August. You normally don't. Basic education fund, so majority of our revenue, 52% of all of our revenue sources from the state, basic education fund. And that was just an $87,900 increase from last year's BEP allocation. That should be pretty normal each month. We sometimes get an adjustment in January for an insurance, and then if we qualified for growth funds last year at the end of the year. We were supposed to get 222,000, but because of COVID, the state they raised the threshold, then we didn't get it. So that's part of that 660 that we're not going to get. Those are usually the only 2 things we get extra with BEP that's not already allocated. These line items were enacted this month. Small grant reimbursements, if it's mini grants, it's very small. And then ROTC, which is in line. The reason you see 1,000 less is there's been some staffing changes and the salaries is a little lower, the new one coming in. So revenue total for August, $5,378,000 and some change compared to $5,100,000 and some change. So we did get a $269,000 increase compared to last August. Sales tax was the big increase, BEP increase, insurance recovery, which insurance recovery is a one-time item. But nonetheless, that's why you saw the increase. Other than just minor normal variances, you go through those line items. So any questions before we jump into some of the major expenses? I certainly, again, won't read every one of these. I'll just hit the highlights since it's been online. So university school, $106,000. That's pretty close to in line with what that was last year for this month. That's their piece of the revenue sharing. So Mr. Riddle, you probably aren't aware of this yet, but the university school, they are a part of Washington County Schools, but they're in separately. They don't need issues. So they have a contract that's been in place since the late 80s. They get a part of the revenue. based on their student enrollment compared to the system student enrollment. And it's a very complex formula that Mr. Whitaker can tell us all about. It's a day or two process, isn't it, Jerry, to figure all that? But it's very complex. And so basically they get a piece of our BEP and our local tax revenue. And roughly 6-7%, something like that. So that'll change each month. When we get the big property tax hits in twice a year, they're part of up to $500,000 a month for a couple months a year. So that just varies per month. July's a month where we have no BEP payment. So therefore their share is a lot lower too. They roughly average 300,000-ish, something like that. On average, probably what they average a month. So, and let's see, I'll again pick some of the higher ones here. Other supplies here. This is IT, 72,250 is IT category, and you can see some of the. You need me to blow that up a little more so y'all can see it better. You can see the breakdown of those 5 items. It was the main items that went in. See webcams, AC carts. I assume AC carts is some type of a charging cart for Chromebooks. Is that right, Heath? That's what it is. Yeah. And then ViewSonic projectors and some laser printers as well.
What's a scan Z unit?
You can see document scanner.
Okay. And then we get into some athletics, some David Crockett High School volleyball equipment, 71,114, and then Riddell All-American football equipment, helmets for this. And you can see the other, we're into the maintenance side, the 72,610 and 72,620. Both of those are considered maintenance categories.
Do those things up there from London, does that come out of his, those are both for profit, does that come out of his portion of?
Yes,
Okay.
so that line item has 65,000 in it, and Josh is split
Should I
between
wait
Josh
till
and Danny,
Keith
north and south side.
I mean, he's,
It is.
She said we're live.
All right. So you can see the pest control, grease trap, chemical. That's normal every month to have pretty much those on there. Building repairs, 5671. So that's CS Corporation for a fire alarm system replacement at the new Boone Creek Elementary School from storm damage. Now, of course, we filed an insurance claim on that. We haven't got that reimbursement yet. We hope should get that reimbursed.
If the school nurse said that, it's
We
because
still
the
have
health
to pay it up
department
front.
told them to. We do not have the authority to quarantine, only that.
And jumping on down, there's an HVAC compressor out of maintenance still for a unit at Crockett. And then you'll always have these pretty much every month. Now the amounts are different, but you can see general electrical, maintenance supplies, HVAC supplies, plumbing, paint, general maintenance, and then the bat removal at Lamar. There's the bat still in down there, so that was a 19,000. Now we did get reimbursed last year, so I assume we may be looking for reimbursement for that if it's approved, so hopefully that'll get reimbursed.
Oh, it's going to be insurance as well?
Last year we did get reimbursed through Tennessee Risk. Now this is a new company. There'll probably be different opinions as to whether this new company's easier to deal with or not, that's all I'll say. But hopefully we'll get reimbursed. So there we go on this one. When you see 72,620, that's your category for maintenance. 499 is where you see other supplies. So you'll have a lot of just stuff that goes in there when you have another supply line item. And that's consistent with other categories. When you see 499 at the end, you'll see it tagged usually as other supplies. And
How hard is it to break? Never mind. We'll wait.
But total in that line, 48,692, that's your main amounts to make up that amount. And then, let's see, this was 1690, and this will be reimbursed by the Safe Schools grant. That is 2 additional printers for our Raptor system. We didn't write which school it was, but it was one of our schools that needed a couple of printers. This is where you go in and they'll print you out the badge on that Raptor system with your name. So, electric bus had a small expense here, and that was the breakdowns here, these two items. Charging station assembly at 3811, and then electric vehicle for an emergency monitoring module, so some type of a module, getting ready for hopefully that electric bus to show up sometime this year. But like to have a charging station, hopefully they'll build it in Canada, so get it built. So, and then so overall expense in August compared to August of 2019, we actually were a little better, 1,285,000 versus 1,316,000. 30,000 less, which I like to see that. That's just right around that 2% mark, so very tight compared to last August. No major variances that stood out, just came in a little less on there. So that's an overview of the expenses as far as the narrative that we normally do in here. So
You may have any questions?
then we go to the payables report next, usually. If there's no more
Yeah,
questions
before
here.
you go there, it's not on here, but if you look at the, I mean, you'll go to it when we look at the expense schedule. What was the workman's comp credit?
Yep, so that one that you saw on there, a credit, that was where we got a discount or a reimbursement from the insurance company where we went to a drug-free workplace.
Oh, okay.
So that 13,000 that you saw, 13,391, was a check we got. It was just a refund for something the premium we had already paid. So that was we just put it back in that line item.
Is that every month we'll get that?
No,
Okay,
it was one
one
time.
time deal.
Yeah, it was one time where we went to that drug-free workplace.
Now, aren't they getting ready to do their workers' comp audit?
Well, we just had ours, but it was under Tennessee risk from
Right,
last year.
yes.
Our guy came by Thursday with,
Yeah.
I had 3 other state auditors here, so I had 4 auditors that day. But, yeah, I had to do the report for him. He was in and out pretty quick. We haven't been notified of any issues yet.
We might have to give that back to somebody. It's not point.
Yeah, well, yeah, we don't know yet. So, yeah.
Let's see, which one was it? Yeah, you did say that the fire alarm system was.
That should be reimbursed. I mean, it's been turned in from what I understand.
Okay. All right.
So next, we'll go to the payables report for the general fund. And this has been out there, so typically you'll have looked at this before. So this report, 12 pages, and of course I can blow it up. And I'm assuming that you've looked at it, but if not, certainly we'll address anything. What we do is the things we just talked about in the narrative are all on here. So myself and Paul go over this, and we kind of hit the highlights of anything that should stand out. But certainly if you've seen anything else that stands out, if you have any questions on anything, just tell me the page number. We'll certainly, like when you see Bright Ridge, that's the electric bill. See several of those on there. CDW government, that'll be IT, which we've talked about.
There's some of them listed on there, but what was the COVID-19 non-instructional expense? We had, looks like we got $56,000 this month.
Right.
73,901, 499. And I could see some of those spread out throughout the payable report, but I couldn't really ascertain what the rest of that was.
Yeah, so Paul, we looked at that. I know you looked into that. The gist of that, I know we've had a lot of,
supplies.
I mean, it's
Predominantly
supplies through maintenance for COVID, schools where they've had to get additional, signs, for example, tell students to walk a certain way. That's just something that comes to mind. But I've noticed a lot of schools have put in requests for that, trying to keep traffic flowing one way. But whenever we're incurring an expense and it's solely because of COVID, we're able to, to cut it down.
And then are we able to receive some kind of state reimbursement for that?
Well, that's going through the gentleman,
That's what I'm
we're in
asking.
the meeting, so we're submitting that as
To
part of.
Homeland Security?
Yeah.
Or email?
Yeah, we just got that gathered and put it in final form to submit everything up through August 31st. Tawana's our contact here, so we've got the information gathered. I just have to put it in a format that's be suitable us in there with the
They quit, I
documentation.
think Homeland Security quit reimbursing masks, maybe back the 1st of September.
If I'm not mistaken, we've yet to buy a mask.
Okay.
I don't remember us buying masks, Paul. Does that ring a bell to you on the
Oh,
table?
yeah, they've got,
That we bought?
yeah, they've got pallets full of.
But they-
When did we buy
But they
those?
were donated, or just given to us by the state, by the feds, by Eastman Chemical.
They bought a lot too, I don't know about
They
the.
bought-
Might have been, was that early on when we bought those?
Yeah.
Okay, hadn't been recent,
Yeah.
so early on.
Maybe we was,
Well, if we bought them early on, that was still, you said they stopped reimbursing after August 31st.
Right.
So those were before August 31st, so hopefully we'll, they said that money might take years to get though, right?
Yeah, but you gotta submit it
Okay.
first.
Well, it took them 3 or 4 months just to get the masks here. They ordered them in March, but a lot of them didn't show up for 2 or 3 months.
I didn't think I'd seen any recent purchase orders for March, for masks, but back in March, yeah, a lot happened since March.
Okay, well, anybody else? No.
But normally when you see this, just if, as you go, we go forward each month, something stands out on there, just make a note, and we'll answer it when you get here for the meeting. Of course, if we don't know the answer, we'll find it out and then send it to you afterwards. But this is just a standard payables report. You'll see it go up and down through the year. This was for August, so it was, you know, it's under, this is usually well over $1 million. So it ended up being $726,000 for this. There's a like the university school payment, $106,000 we talked about before. There it is on here. So all those amounts we mentioned will be embedded on here. Well, so if no other questions, I'll go to the next item. And Mitch, since you asked me about this, I'll just go to the budget line item with us. You asked about science supplies. One of our
Yeah,
conversations. I'll just tell you.
Before Annette got, just so she'll know, I made the comment that we wanted to look and make sure that our science departments were still, since we had this decline in advertising revenue, which sounds like it's really gonna come back, because if
Right.
we've got 2,500, then.
I just think we need to cover it until that comes in.
We would have lost advertising at the end of last year, is what would have happened when the buses, school
Yeah,
got
that's
shut
last
down.
year, right?
Yeah, but as far as this year, it normally wouldn't start coming in until September anyway, because, but here is where that's budgeted. $24,000 is what the board had earmarked in the past. Now, where you see this, 71,100, 499, now you notice all these lines say 71,100, 499. This is the one where the budget is for the main stuff, but we have teased out 24,000 and put it here. Notice the difference is right here. You got a prefix called 802. And but that's what differentiates the money earmarked for science. So it's the same 71,100, 499 line, but you got an 802 here. And that earmarks this for science. So they haven't lost any money budget-wise. They can still spend this money as soon as I get requests and the director approves it. They've got $24,000 still to spend. Now, let's say the revenue wouldn't come in. Let's just say something happened. It's still in the budget for them to spend. The net effect would be, if we didn't get the revenue for it, it would just come out of our fund balance. But it's still budgeted for them to go ahead and spend once I get approval.
why don't we just go ahead and cut that money loose, we'll let Cindy and Ashley just go ahead and turn it loose.
I just need to know the amounts per school and
We've been
then.
going to $12,000 it's left.
Yeah. And maybe we'll have to, Paul, if you can help me here, maybe we'll look at this, because I think each school had a different allocation, or maybe not each school, but high schools, it seems like we're different.
We'll just do it the same way we've always done.
Okay, we'll pull that, Paul, and match it from the previous year, and we'll just go ahead and get that done.
Let me ask you a question on that, just on this particular one then, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman. It's kind of like art. We do the same thing with art teachers. We just, I guess, take 10,000, split it between 10 schools and send out $1,000. And I mean, here's another example to me, or at least I'd like to know why. Shouldn't we, we got some schools got 1,000, some schools got 200. Instead of dividing an equal pie among every school, wouldn't we be better off to do it per student? That way, every kid would be equal. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Divided up, on enrollment basis.
Well, can we not, is this science kind of the same, fit in that same category as art?
The reason that we did this to begin with is we had bought some science parts and we needed to make sure they were filled. Plus, we had AP classes that are required in high school to have certain things they have to have, and those teachers were buying it out of their pockets. So that's why we were trying to push that back into the classroom so that the AP kids were getting their college credits and everybody was, you know, not
So it
having
doesn't
out of pocket.
actually go down to elementary then?
It
is
does. They get money for their science card to put stuff into their science
It
card.
funds down to the 7th grade.
Yes.
But you understand what I'm saying, though?
Yeah. Yeah, South Central
Enrollment-wise-
doesn't need as much money as Boones Creek Elementary does.
Yeah, or any, I mean, Daniel Boone and Crockett need more than Paul Branch. I mean, you know what I'm saying?
I don't really know how Carla did it with the elementaries. I know at the high school, we sent exact amounts to Boone and Crockett, to the department head, and then they pulled in the teachers and they decided how to carve it up, and we just run the purchase orders.
Well, I know like in art, and I know this ain't art, but I'm going back to it, I know like art teachers, they divide them up and everybody gets the same. And somebody may have 300, somebody may have 800, and it ain't apples to apples.
You're talking students, right? 'Cause
Yes.
I was confused when we were talking, I thought we were talking dollars there, and I was like.
No,
why
I'm
is
talking
somebody
about
get
the
200?
enrollment based.
Yes.
Can we at least make an effort on this science money? I know the art money's already went out, this is getting ready to go out. We could fix this
You make a motion, I'll second it.
to make sure that this money's allocated per an enrollment basis.
On a per student basis. Now, in the high schools, it'll be about even because they're about the
Right.
same size.
Right.
We'll divide
Would
it
you
up.
entertain that motion? Would you everybody like to make a motion that we take the science money right here and divide it up on an enrollment basis, per student basis?
Mr. Chairman, as a voting member of this committee, I'll second that motion.
All right, there's a motion and a second,
This-
discussion.
Is there any cons to doing that?
We're gonna spend it somehow. That sounds, that's as good as any plan we've had before.
Okay.
The only thing that bothers me is the AP, making sure the AP classes get what they need, because it's a total different ballgame than just a high school class.
Right.
Is it, clarification, is it an allocation based on total student enrollment, or is it based on
Well, we've done it-
those taking science?
I'm just going back to art now, what I've heard in art. It's pretty much everybody just splits an equal pie against everybody.
But when you're dealing with elementary and high school, you're dealing with apples and oranges again. I
Yep.
get the enrollment thing for the arts, I get that for the elementary, but when you're talking about high school, just evening it out, because you have that, just about the same amount of students every semester. in those
Mr.
classes.
Chairman, maybe if we divided it up according to the total number of students taking science.
That's what I was,
That's,
Now, that would give the lion's share to the high schools.
I need to make an amendment to that motion then, or
I think
can I
we
just
can-
amend that motion?
I think we could say that was the intent of your motion, if
Okay.
that's okay with you.
Jennifer, that's the way the motion reads, based on the number of enrolled in science. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
fine.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Figure out how to do that.
The only other thing I'll say is on this expense report, and of course, this is 20 pages, so we won't go through it. But you'll see here, this 71,100,429, you'll see all these other 71,100,429s going down to here. These are zero budget. That is because all these are represented under the main one here with 200,000 in it for these supplies. This is broke down on a per school basis. So this is one of the things when the state started requiring us to submit cost of school data. There's several places in the expense report where we busted it out per school. So anything that's spent here in these line items with the zero budget are really represented here at the top under that 200,000. We went above and beyond. We have started tracking many areas outside of what the state requires. The state has told me not to report those additional areas though, because they want us to report the same thing everybody else is reporting. So we have the ability to, we're more detailed than the state in that area. But I just mention that because you'll see several places throughout this expense report where you'll see that same format. And as you go through the pages. But certainly I won't go through 20 pages. We normally don't go over this unless there's a question. So certainly if there are any other questions, we'll go there. This, since we're here, this $4,118,000, most of that's university schools. So roughly about it's over a $4 million budget for the university school, which is what we anticipate will pay them of our revenue. That goes under the 71,189. Anyway, if there's no other questions, I'll stop here.
Hearing none. Carry on.
That'll conclude the expense report presentation unless there are other questions. I do put the balance sheet on there, but it's there for reference.
Well, point us out to where our fund balance is.
Well, on the balance sheet, you would just simply go to the top, roughly right here. Now this is not for the audit report, because the audit report's not done, but roughly at the end of August, we had around $10,200,000 in there, 214,000. And you'll see that go up and down. If you start tracking that, you'll start to see it increasing each month now. And that's a normal part of the process. When property tax gets hit once a year, we will get it up to as high as about 15 or 16 million that we need it there, because in the month of June, you have deferred payroll, and instead of an average of 5.6 million or 5 million expense, that goes to about 12 million in 1 month with still the same revenue. So you'll go in the hole $6 to $8 million. So it's a normal part of the process, because property tax, you don't get even each month. Out of that 12 million in property tax, we'll get 8.5 million or so of that in a 2-month period. So that won't stay consistent each month. That's what I'm saying. But you want it to build up and get to that 15, 16 million mark by June, or else you're in trouble when you get there. So, and remember, in May, you don't get BEP. In July, you don't get BEP, so you take a big hit in fund balance.
Will you scroll down to the equity fund balance section? We've got it, just for, make sure everybody knows what these numbers represent.
So we budgeted 3.4 million this year to come from fund balance for a deficit. That's roughly the 2 million that we're required to keep in reserves. And then this is just extra funds here outside of that 2 million as well. This is in there because the state wants us to separate out the hybrid stabilization rate for TCRS. That was new just a couple of years ago, but that's where that number comes from. The actual cash, when I think of, we talk of fund balance, actual cash in the bank's right here. And property tax receivable, this is just the way the state requires us to put property tax for the next year. I know you're familiar with that process, Mitch, but that's why that $13,600,000, it's like a receivable that we.
But it's offset, if you'll scroll down into the liability section, it's offset by what they call a deferred asset, which is the 12.9 million. So, I mean, it does.
Right.
I really wish it wasn't even on there, but basically, yeah. So out of our cash, we've essentially got almost $5.5 million that we're saying we're holding aside because we're going to use $3 million of it to meet our obligations this year. Our spend will be more than our revenue, and $2 million that the state says we have to keep. So the rest of that $8 million is unassigned.
So it's not 8, but it's 10.2 less than 3.4 less than 2.
Gotcha.
So it'd be.
Yeah, if you're looking
roughly
at cash.
4.5. If you look at
Right.
real cash, you're looking at about 4.5.
Okay, you wanna take us to where we're going
Typically, at
next?
this time, you'll take a motion for approval of the general
Oh.
fund. But that's your call, unless you want to do federal and then do them both.
Will someone make a motion to accept the fund financials?
Make a motion.
General fund. All right, motion's been made, do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion passed, they are accepted.
And with federal fund, it's a little different. So the federal fund, we are fully reimbursed at 100%, so this is our general fund. Now that's as long as we abide by the guidelines of the grants. So, and we try to make sure we do that. Really, the relevant thing is the payables report for the federal fund. And this is just $55,000, so obviously it's much smaller than we look at from the general. And as far as the highlights there, the 2851 amount, let me blow that up. There we go. The 2851, that's for expiring service fee for materials. And this is where Mr. Whitaker could probably answer the details more than me. I can give you the amounts and what we shown they were for. CDW government, that's IT, of course, Chromebook adapters, 75 of them, and the CARES Act is reimbursing that, the ESSER grant. So, and all these are reimbursed at 100%. CDW flash drives, that's IT as well. And then ACT training material, that's Title II reimbursement for $16,800. 2,400 at ETSU, that's seminar registrations for CTE. And then 21,782, that was SPED, instructional materials. And that's probably out of the IDAA grant. I didn't write that down here, but fully reimbursed, of course, at 100% in line with the grant. Anything else you want to add, Jerry?
No, that 21,000 is a sustainability grant that the SPED gives. It's a sustainability grant.
Okay. But that's your highlights with spend and SPED. The expense reports on here, there's really not as much to really talk about like the general. Each fund is broken down differently. If you want some reading material late at night, if you're having trouble going to sleep, this is good to look at. You just pull it up and start looking at those numbers, and you can see it is like this is a consolidated administration grant. That's 010, and you'll see that 010 code at the end of every one of these expenses. And here's Title I, for example. You'll see the code 100. So that's our code, project code for Title I. Right now, there's 1.364 budgeted, but I believe we take carryover dollars that I haven't updated yet, so it's actually more than that. And then, I won't go through all these, but you get that. That's the format of all of them. Title 1D, grant number is project code 160. You can see.
Grants are 160.
For Title,
Oh, Title I.
yeah, well, Title 1D, and let me find what I did here. Well, let me find it. I'm going to plug this so I can find out where that went. So it's my format back in a second.
Jerry, is there anything happening on the federal level as a result of all the pandemic that we need to, be thinking about from an operational level with the?
I can't think of anything that's we've not talked about already through CARES Act and things like that. So not to this point.
Have we saved any money by the CARES Act picking up the bill that we'll see a savings on at the end of the year that we don't know about?
That's, I guess that'd be more your question, perhaps Dr. Flannery would be the savings with these things. Because I know the idea was to purchase those Chromebooks. That was, I think Brad mentioned some things in here, the flash drives, and there are a lot of those pieces that we were able to use.
But we really didn't budget for those, did we, or did we?
Well, in the federal side we did, and in that ESSER grant that you're managing, how many Chromebooks are in there? That's an enormous amount.
We've ordered 1,500.
Yeah.
We don't have.
Right.
Our today may be longer before we get it. So we've also planned on maybe year two getting another round.
Okay.
So they're just hard to get. And they're all back orders.
So in a sense, that's money we don't have to spend out of general funds, so they're fully reimbursed.
We used it for some online textbook type things.
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying. I just wonder some of the savings that we acquired that we really don't, well, I don't think the board knows about because we got it from federal money, especially on the textbooks that we bought electronically. I mean, it's been great. And we got them kind of, I ain't gonna say for free, but it come out of a different, bucket. What I am concerned about is though in 5, 6 years, whenever these textbooks go, or ancient, I guess you'd say, or whatever, time to redo it. Do we have a plan to buy those back at some point, or is that something we need to talk about sometime, or?
The digital textbooks.
Well, no, all the online textbooks that we bought with the CARES Act money, because everybody was taking on the Chromebooks, which is a great thing. I'm not fussing about it, but I mean, it just, when it comes time to repeat and buy those out again, we ain't gonna have the CARES. I hope we keep talking about the pandemic.
You're right, there's no plan 6 years from now to fund that again.
And that's the importance of keeping your fund balance at a good level. We've got it at a strong level now, and that's the importance of that.
So Dr. Flannery, how would that be any different from textbook replacements, physical textbook replacements?
The books that I actually bought with CARES Act money, we ordinarily wouldn't have put much money into because they're so prohibitively expensive.
Okay.
Like AP stuff, it's awful to say it, but we don't normally buy a lot of advanced placement curriculum materials because we just can't afford it. But this was a good time to do it. She jumped on it and the board agreed. So
Which
that's
is a
just-
great thing. I mean,
It's a great thing. We just can't do it every 6 years. I hope we don't have a pandemic every 6 years.
The books we purchased, they came with that textbook. That's the way that the books that we purchased came with
The electronic.
the electronics.
Yes.
Because that's the way it's packaged now. You don't buy one without the other, is what I understood from.
That is so.
Okay, you buy one for the classroom, and then you got digital for the kids.
But that just comes with it. That's not, it's not two separate
Right.
things. You can't purchase them separately. You purchase it in its way it comes.
Well, that really concludes the report on the federal fund.
I'll entertain a motion to accept the federal fund statement.
Make a motion to accept the federal fund for August 2020.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of accepting the August federal fund statement, say aye. Opposed? Motion passes.
Okay, so next item is school nutrition, just an overview. And this is in line with what I've been asked to bring before, and see if I can figure out how to rotate it on here.
Now, when we get to the end of this one, are we going to accept the graphs? Is that what we're?
Usually there's not been a motion to accept it, so
All right.
it is up to y'all if y'all want to start.
That's fine.
Whatever y'all like to do.
No, I just-
I just want to accept the big ones, not the flirt
Yeah,
with them.
yeah. But this is just where I'll track with the dietary fund revenue and expenses and their fund balance, and I'll do this monthly. And so certainly, one thing that jumps out here, and if I go over here, you can see the years here. So right here, this is representative of this year, the first 2 months. You can see a noticeable increase, and so even from the prior year, net change from the prior year, you've got 83,000 more in July than July of 19, 64,000 more in August than August of 19. And digging into that, it seems to be just the addition, the free lunches that they were still delivering over the summer. or at the end of the school year, reimbursement just came in for those over those months. So there's where you have additional revenue that's came in to the tune of about nearly $150,000 more for the first 2 months of the year, more than last year for the first 2 months of the year. But you can see the normal revenue pattern. Now in FY20, here's a spike here. You see it was down here, but look at this enormous spike in May. That's where they started getting reimbursement for the COVID. Because of COVID, for those lunches they were delivering. So this school went out in the middle of March. April, they were delivering all those lunches. April, May, and I believe on the end of the summer. But huge spike in their revenue here of over $700,000 right here in May. You can see the May of the previous year was 283, 324 2 years back, and look at that, jumped to 734.
Is there a way to pull, well, every dollar coming in May, June, is gonna be from all that, right?
Addition, yeah, pretty much, because they wasn't getting lunch money here.
It just gives us a
Yeah.
false sense of hope, though, that all, that we sold more meals or whatever.
Right, because here in April and May, there was no meals being sold.
Even in April too?
Yeah, school's out in April. So in fact, from the middle of March to the end of the year, there was no meals being sold in the schools, so no kids there.
But we were feeding the kids.
Yes. Yes, we were delivering food.
Right.
And then getting
So
reimbursed.
we were generating revenue, just deferred because of the billing process. Mr. Hammond, you had a question?
Yeah, I don't remember seeing this, and I think I probably overlooked it, but, Peter, but what is the fund balance for?
Out there?
Yeah.
I'll get to that in a second.
Oh, okay, sorry.
We'll get to that.
And let me just ask this too. Is there a certain requirement by auditors or the state government, federal government, because I know they get subsidized federally, is there a certain requirement for them to either spend down or have a certain amount in there?
So what I've been told is to try to keep about 3 months worth of expenses in there. Now, I don't know that I've actually looked at the verbiage of the actual law and had Scott looked at it, but that's just kind of been the word that Caitlin had always been told through her, is you want to at least try to keep about 3 months worth of expenses, which in the case of dietary, that'd be roughly $750,000. That's something I can give to Attorney Bennett and actually get the actual verbiage of the law.
Well, that's okay. I just didn't know if you knew right off. I know some federal projects require spend down or federal funds. Is that true?
Yeah, there's a certain amount of carryover you can get. Jerry, you might be able to, you can probably answer that better than me. With certain federal grants, you're required to spend a certain amount, because I know at the end of each year, you get those reports, and if we don't spend a certain amount by a certain time frame, we lose it.
In Title I's 15%. You can carry over 15%. Now, you can get a one-time waiver. Well, it's a waiver for 3 years if you go more than 15%. So Title II, or Title III is 2%. So some of them are a little different.
And that's how much you can carry over.
That is how much you can carry over to the next year.
Meaning if you don't spend up to that point, you can't carry it over, you're gonna lose it.
You can lose it.
So going to the next graph here, the expenses, you can see this chart. So in July, and you can see when I look at this trend here, you had around 58, 53, 50, and it did jump to 93 in July, and I don't have the explanation for that with me tonight as to why there was a $42,000 jump in their expenses in July. I have a feeling, though, it's timing, because if you get the August, it was 67,000 less than the prior August. So on the operational standpoint, to me, there must have been some timing differences of some expense being put there that's close.
Weren't we feeding kids though in July where normally we wouldn't, or not?
Yes, we have not stopped feeding kids since
Right.
March.
Yeah.
Right.
Which would explain,
Yeah.
that would explain some of that. Now, I don't have, would you know a reason for a decrease in August of their expenses, Dr. Flannery?
It may have something to do with availability of commodities after the start of the fiscal year. They just pre-bought a lot of stuff, but Caitlin would have to answer that.
Yeah, probably didn't have to, they usually don't buy no more after April or something, another to try to clean out the fridge and then buy everything back.
Good.
Well, the kids weren't coming back to the school, so.
It makes sense.
So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what the expenses are in September. You can see the last 2 years in September, almost the same, 307 and 308. So we'll be interested, we'll look at, see what that was next month coming in. But really, what I look at here at the end, when I get to the total, this should say July, our August totals. I forgot to change that when I turned it into a PDF. But July through August,
Brett, on these charts, if she, in those prior years, because as we move forward, if dietary buys any equipment out of their fund balance, do you filter that out, or is that included?
they don't buy it out of their fund balance.
I see.
If it's a
Okay.
capital item,
Okay.
anything 10,000 or above, we would have to get approval to buy that out of the general fund.
Or we can't buy it out of their fund.
No, you could, they
You
can
can.
buy it out of
Yeah,
it.
you
can.
You're just saying we have.
Yeah, we haven't.
We have before.
And,
We have?
Yeah.
See, that's what I was thinking with that big jump in October.
since I've been here, it's not been done.
No,
Probably
because they ain't had no money.
Right.
Yeah, when I
See,
came
we-
in, their balance was in the negative.
We had to put, what, 75,000 or something like that in to bail them out?
About 3 years ago.
About 3 years ago.
3 years ago. When Caitlin came in, she came into a balance that was negative, pretty much when she was hired.
What they came
So it's
into.
been she's been able to oversee the operations and really turn it around, so. So, yeah, what I did in my formula here, and this is on me, is I didn't, add August into that, so, but what I'll have when I correct it is the total amount of spend for the first 2 months each year, or next month will be the first 3. I'll have to correct that formula. But the fund balance is the next page where we really want to get to. So you're going to see a tremendous spike here in fund balance. Let me go to last May here when it really started to spike. So 1.1 million compared to 695,000 the year before at the same time. So they started getting a lot of this COVID revenue here. And plus, if you'll remember, we funded $267,000 of their payroll out of the general fund because we were told that the state was not going to fund that under the dietary umbrella, under that dietary fund. So it ended up is, we funded 267. They got a tremendous amount more revenue, so the result's been a large spike in their fund balance. So we get here to July, and you're seeing a fund balance last July of 816,000 going up to 1.479 million. So, and in August, they increased that fund balance. They did not go, I mean, it's a little more, but in August, you can see that it's went to almost 1.5 million, which is $795,000 more than it was August of 2019.
So will you take the money and put it back in our general fund?
That would take
or-
board action. I'm not allowed to do that.
Okay.
That would take board action if you choose to do that. Now, that would be up to you if they need some equipment upgrades or whatever, that would be, you've
Yeah,
got.
and I don't think,
that would be up to you.
we're early in the year right now, but I do think that's something you keep in mind, and then we're moving into the last quarter of the year, and depending on how Brad's doing on, how we're doing in the general fund side, then, we can move money if we need to, so.
But through August, to answer your question, they're almost $1.5 million in their fund balance. And when I said it was negative about the time Caitlin came in, so Caitlin, I believe, was hired right in here, August, September of 2007. Actually, she was 2016. I came in oh, excuse me, this would be 16, because this is the fiscal year. This is August, September of 16, and you get out here, and this is June of 17. So she came in right in this time frame here. And you can see she came into a negative fund balance, really. She had a bunch of bills she told me that was behind, and they had to pay. So right here, it all went negative. At the worst, $260,000 negative. And just last December, that was an $839,000 positive. So that's $1 million improvement, in a 36-month period when you look at that. And there's been cost-cutting measures. There's been more efficiency in buying products and cost-cutting with downsizing staff. Just the 2 ways she's mainly done that. So
And we haven't changed the mill price significantly, have we? If we even changed it
I
at
think there's
all?
only been one increase
State
since I've
sets
been
that.
here.
We don't set that.
State says that?
Why don't we approve it?
The
We
board
have
already had
to approve
approve
it.
Yeah, we said that.
That,
I think we set the mill.
no, we had to raise it because somebody sent us something. What was all that about?
Well, yeah, if
The board has to rubber stamp what the state says the fee has to be.
do they set a floor, or do they set a cap?
They set a floor.
Correct, so you could have a higher number.
You-
Not that you would.
You could
Right, but
theoretically,
yeah, they set a floor.
Yeah.
So what was mentioned a moment ago on the 75,000 that Keith mentioned, that happened right in here. At the end, state auditors came in and started, and I was hired right here in April of 17. State auditors came in a month before I got here. BCS used to audit our general, federal, and dietary funds, so the state came in. So right when I walked in, they were writing us up over a negative balance right here. So that's where it was at the state auditor's direction. We had to go to the board, and you all were, those of you that were here, remember, we had to make a motion to move 75,000 from the general fund to dietary just to get it home.
Well, the good thing is we're adding about 300,000 a year now, it's fund balance, if you look back at the last 3 years.
Yeah. So that's a picture. So right now, dietary is in the best position money-wise than it's been in years. I don't know how many years back, but many years, probably maybe even a decade. And
When I first come on the board, it had a lot of money. Cause they would go in there and we'd purchase new trucks and we'd pull it out of their system to buy new food trucks and stuff, and then it just started going the other way, but the price of food and the stuff went up. There's a big money difference compared to what it was 10 years ago.
But some of this is reimbursement or like a grant because of COVID, and we're feeding people, so we wouldn't see that.
it has spiked right now because of the reimbursements due to COVID, and then the general fund took care of nearly $270,000 worth of their payroll expense. So it's a combination of those two things as to why it's spiked.
I'm gonna make a prediction that we'll end up feeding kids for nothing. The state's gonna reimburse, because they've already been talked like
It's
that.
USDA that was paying us back down.
They're going, don't you, Bill, don't you think that could happen?
Well, we've been on 100% reimbursement now for almost a month, and the money's supposed to run through December the 31st unless it runs out, and it ain't gonna run out in election year.
No, I just feel like, but I feel like they'll come back with a deal that they'll pay for all the kids' lunches,
I don't doubt it.
you know, because you got free and reduced lunch.
We were spending $3 for every dollar we were bringing in there at the start of the school year, and then all of a sudden we're making money because we're getting reimbursed. So Caitlin's feeding everybody that's hungry anymore, age 0 to 18.
Anybody else have any more questions on the dietary? All right. Let's move to, what's next? Vehicle.
Vehicle expense analysis. I was just asked to do this last month, so I put this together. And this is an estimate, of course. The best way that I know to estimate this. So this is a list of your employees, and you would have got this. I've just added some columns out here. This is a list of the employees that regularly drive vehicles home and what they're driving. And the only one that was part-time was Ms. Stallard, and I just used a 25% ratio when I got to her final figure, just because I was told it was just part of the time as needed. But you can see the top. So one way round trip, and this is based on where the bus garage is. The bus garage to their house, round trip. So you can see it's different depending on who it is. Estimated miles per year, estimated miles per gallon, and we used 15 because all these are 4x4 trucks. There's only one newer 4x4 truck right here that gets about 17 miles to a gallon average. But the rest of these you can see are 08 Dodge 4x4s, Chevy Silverado 4x4 cargo vans. And in talking with Mr. Roberts, our transportation supervisor, we both were coming in around 15, probably a good average miles per gallon. This we can, so the daily the daily miles per gallon is the estimate right here in this column. Estimated annual gallons that'll use, that's based on a 260-day work year. And there's some maintenance costs that we didn't factor in, like oil changes, maybe tires every now and then, but they don't all work 260 days a year, because there's vacations, there's times that they're, you know, they don't have to come in for whatever reason, if it's bad weather. So we figure that'll average it out, because normal maintenance costs is oil changes. Typically, you don't replace a motor or a transmission, that's rare. So, but aside from that, we thought that would kind of wash out. Expense per gallon, we use $2 a gallon, but I have a sheet where I can modify that, and it'll factor in and change that. It's all, so if y'all want me to use a different mile per gallon, I can pull it up and do it in 10 seconds. But annual expense for fuel is the estimate, if we say, is right around $8,800, just under $8,800. And but that's again, we can go to the sheet and I can change that $2 a gallon and put $1.75 or $2.50 or whatever you want, and then it'll be instantly, it'll change that number the way I've formula set up. So
Anybody have any questions or comments on the discussion?
I just don't, Mr. Chairman, if I may, I just don't, I mean, I understand that Eddie T, when he's working tournaments on the weekends, to be able to drive his truck. But that's the only exception I see on there. I mean, and I don't care who it is, but I'm just saying, for you look through that list, I just think, and I understand, as Dr. Flannery said, you know, it's a perk to drive these vehicles home, but out of the, 1,200 employees we have in the system, we're only giving 12, 13, 14 people a perk to drive vehicles home, and I just don't see it. I mean, I would, if you'd entertain a motion, I'd make a motion that they be parked on Friday, you know, every evening and picked up the next morning, if you'd allow that.
Well, would that not be more of a policy question?
We don't really, it's not in policy.
That's where you have to put it, I mean.
But you're gonna let Eddie drive the van or his truck through the week, or just?
No, if there is tournaments, he could drive it on the weekend, just like, I mean, if there was something, you know, some existing, somebody's gonna work on a Saturday or whatever, and they need to, I mean, most of the time, they should be clocking in and out at the maintenance garage, I hope. I mean, it kinda holds them accountable to work, 7 to 3:30, if they come in and out of the maintenance garage. It keeps people from saying, you know, people's going home at 2:30. I mean, I've heard it, I know everybody's heard it probably, that, you know, certain ones are going home at, you know, at dinner and staying at 2 hours, and they quit at 2:30 and all this. I mean, this would end that talk. From 7 to 3, their vehicle, you know, 7 to 3:30 or whatever, their vehicle will be at the maintenance garage, and there wouldn't be anybody taking advantage of that.
Mr. Hammond?
Dr. Flannery, do the company vehicles or school vehicles beside the buses have GPS on them?
No, just the buses.
Because I know these are just averages, 8,700 a month. I mean,
a year,
yeah, a year, I mean, so.
Well, Chad, I mean, I think finance, I mean, these are financial numbers, but I really do think that what you're talking about is almost a policy issue. And so I think that, you know, it probably would be, I mean, if you want to make a motion, I guess we'd be entertaining, but, I mean, I would lean more to letting the policy committee come forward with a policy on vehicle use and, you know, finance, you've got the numbers here from a financial perspective, and how they want to implement that.
Is that, is there any, how did we get here? Is there any policy, Dr. Flannery, that supports people driving cars home?
No
It just-
policy.
It's just out there in limbo, sort of? We just
don't-
do it, but there's no,
We just do it, and I don't remember a time when we didn't.
yeah.
There was a time there was 50 or 60 vehicles went home every day. Then it went, we had a cash crunch, and Ron Dykes cut that to 0, and then it got back up to where it is now.
I mean, Dr. Flannery, what do you think? I mean, it's 8,700 we could save what happens if somebody's driving that vehicle on a weekend, hypothetically? Or 10:30 Friday night? Somebody has a wreck, that's our insurance, we'd have to cover it, right?
If it was 10:30 on a Friday night and they was going after a bus at an away football
No, I'm
game,
just talking about, they were using it, you know, hey, I'm in the truck.
we'd be in a big old mess because it'd be personal business and a company vehicle. And I'd say the insurance would just say, you're out of luck.
So what do we do when a county employee, let's say Paul, for instance, takes his vehicle, he needs to go look at something at Fall Branch? He's in his own vehicle, he has a wreck. Who covers that?
It's on him.
You understand what I'm saying? I just,
Well, if that county person's driving that vehicle at 10:30 at night and it's not nothing to do with the school system, yeah, he's in trouble. But it should be something to do with the school system if that county person's out at 10:30
and I'm not
at
saying
night.
it for any reason, I'm just saying hypothetically, if the county vehicles, or there are 13 that are listed, are being used from 7 to 3:30, they're company, doing company business. But if they're out any time after that, and they're not working overtime, we're on the hook for something.
When we parked vehicles 15 or 12 years ago, Ron come back with a list of ones that needed to drive it. This board now needs to be is this board looking to say we need to shorten that list? Are you saying that Phil Patrick don't need to drive a vehicle home? Are you saying that Michelle Booth don't need to be driving a vehicle home? Are you saying that that's what needs to be put out if that's what you want to do?
I don't care whose name's on it, I mean, I just.
Well, I'm just saying, you've got, all right, Lynn
Well,
Archer.
let's do this. I mean, we can sit here and debate this all night long.
I really
Well,
bench thinks it needs to come through this committee instead of policy.
Well, I need a motion then.
Right?
We don't have a motion on the floor, if anybody wants to make a motion.
I'll make a motion that we park all the trucks every evening after quitting time. Except Eddie T's on the weekends that a tournament's going on. Make that exception.
One question, this may not be my place, but let's say there's a football game or sporting event, would you want to have one mechanic on call? I'm just putting that out there in case a bus went down.
Well, I'm assuming everybody on here is actually on call. It's just,
Brother, they gotta go home and get a car,
yeah,
or they gotta go to the bus garage and get a car.
yeah. I mean, I just seen them, I know, this to save my job. I mean, nobody drives a company vehicle home. We're all on call. When they call you, you get paid from the time you answer the phone to the time you get the job done. So,
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Not to drag this out, but it kind of goes back to that whole building issue we had with people volunteering work and who was responsible for it and all that sort of stuff. The point you made a while ago is, we all know they're not supposed to be out driving them after work, but where in our rule book says if they was and they had a wreck, what's the consequences and who's responsible? That, I mean, that is something we need to think about. If we leave this alone, we do need to revisit that. Whether we do or don't, I don't know, but I want to throw that out there. Because that just brings up a good point to, where are we on that?
We got a motion to park all the vehicles except for Eddie T for
only on weekends that he has a ball
ball
game.
games. Is there a second? Okay, hearing none, we're gonna move on. All right. Next item, Trail.
That's all the items that I had. I think Dr. Flannery has an item.
One quick one, because I know Mr. Meredith has a county commission meeting here in 13 minutes. If, and this is a big if, folks, if the old Boones Creek Elementary opens for child care, the monthly custodial costs are going to run right at $6,000. Now, 100% of that will come from the CARES Act allocations from county government, and that'll come by means of reimbursement. But I'm asking that this committee recommend to the full board that I be allowed to amend the custodial contract up to that amount, if and only if we receive a written agreement from Washington County government and Johnson City government for reimbursement money. I hope I made sense.
You got that down, Judy, for your motion?
They do, they
They did.
do.
So that's the motion, right?
I can make that motion,
got-
can't I?
you're on
Yeah, I
committee.
can. I put that in the form of a motion.
Second.
Second. Okay, any discussion?
So explain that one more time.
All right, if we move kids in there, hopefully 100 or more, we'll have to have custodial services during the day, at night, and supplies. The custodial service that you're contracted with now estimates at right at $6,000 a month. Now, we'll have to pay them, but you get reimbursed every month
Right.
if this goes through. The reason it's a big if is because CARES Act runs out on December the 31st. Now, the county and the city are trying to get, and I don't know who you'd petition, but they're trying to get it extended to the end of the school year. If that doesn't happen, then I'm gonna have to come up with about $25,000 a month. I don't believe they'll do it.
No.
So a lot of it depends on a decision made in literally Washington.
Okay.
So that's,
Chairman Doe?
Mr. Mayor, for Dr. Flannery. So, we do all this, where's the future of that property for us?
hopefully, come June the 30th, the government takes a deed from the board. Now, if we run childcare, that's over with at the end of the school year anyway.
I don't want this to sound bad, but where do we benefit from that?
We don't. It's a community service for government workers and essential industrial workers in the county.
Okay.
And we don't.
We just need to think about.
You're
if we
talking about
wanna
for
do
the
that.
daycare, you're talking about the
That's what I'm saying.
childcare.
Childcare,
It's
yeah.
childcare, and we're having to pay the electric bill and everything, so that's how we benefit.
No, I know.
You're
but
talking
what
about the
I'm
transfer of
saying,
the building.
We're gonna tie up our piece of property for free for,
Few months.
A few months.
that's what I'm asking. I didn't know what the long term,
And
Right
then
now,
to
we're just
transfer the property
paying bills on it.
to the state.
I
So
just,
where's the benefit to us at the end of the day on that?
yeah.
Yeah.
And a timeline, and, I'm saying there's a lot of questions there.
One thing we know for a fact is there's no money in FY '21 for the state to take over that property.
Yeah.
So it'll be July 1
Yeah.
at the earliest.
I'm just saying y'all need to think about, do you want to enter into this period before you vote to enter into this?
You talking about the childcare or the other one?
Tying up our building,
The childcare.
The child.
childcare, whatever you want to call it. I'm just saying, before you enter into a contract, with anybody to use your building, how long are you tying it up? What's the lifespan of this deal? And
You raise a good question because, I mean, what Dr. Flannery's asked is to negotiate with the janitorial company.
Fine.
The contract that ties the facility, I'm assuming, have we already acted on that?
Last month, the board authorized me to enter into negotiations with city and county government with an eye toward creating a school-age childcare program there.
And does that agreement have to come back to this board to approve?
There was nothing in the motion to that effect, no.
we need
I
to,
thought we just said enter into agreement though, to
I
try to
thought it was
negotiation. That's all that was
negotiation.
all.
that's what I
And
thought.
then
it
it
was
come back to us
negotiation.
to, if that's what the board wants to do, if it was a negotiation.
Yeah. I know we didn't approve to just go
Because
do
what-
whatever.
No, because we were talking about, how much the payment was, that we weren't gonna pay, you know, all the electricity and all that.
And I mean, and all that's fine, but I don't know that I wanna do that anyway, cause I don't know all the details personally.
Well, this board made a motion and it passed, and we went to Nashville and offered it to the governor, to the
For
state.
how long?
It's theirs.
State, it'll be theirs.
It'd be theirs for the,
For CTE.
for
Yes.
CTE,
Well,
yeah.
we ain't talking about CTE, we're talking about daycare.
Hey, what happens if he, 6 months down the road down here, he says, we're gonna start doing that. I'm wanting to do that.
There's no money in it. to-
It
to
don't
take
matter
care
in
of it.
that, they'll find money.
Has the state
We
agreed?
have to give it to them.
Yeah, no, well,
Well, they've not
but
took
but
over
have
it.
they taken it?
No.
Have they accepted it?
No.
Well,
Bill,
Bill,
What,
they have accepted it, right?
what?
The Boones
The
Creek
Boones
Elementary?
Creek Elementary.
Has the state accepted the building?
I have absolutely nothing in writing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we're still sitting there with nothing.
Yeah, but we're paying the bills and electricity and everything.
We just need to, through some committee, we better get a hold of this real quick before we,
Okay, the motion allowed me to discuss entering into an agreement, but did not enter into an agreement.
that's what I thought.
Folks, this is going a whole, way far down the road. I mean, there's people allocating money in
Well, I
Johnson City
mean-
and down at the courthouse on this.
To discuss it means we need to discuss it here, I think. I mean, they're discussing it, but somebody needs to discuss it
The
with
particulars
us.
have, you know, with
Yeah.
the discussion, we just need to know the particulars. We don't need to be left out on the island.
Yeah, somebody needs to bring us something back to discuss.
I can tell you, it won't cost the school board a dime, and you'll end up saving money, because
Right.
they're gonna pay the utilities, and that's about $9,000.
And that's fine, I'm not arguing that, I'm just saying,
We need an end date.
I need an end date,
Last day
yeah.
of school,
Last day of school.
yeah.
And then where do we go from there? That's what I was
Then it's an
getting
empty
at.
building until the governor decides what he's
Yeah,
gonna do.
so we need to put that on our long-range plan or something to, if they don't do something by the end of school, we need to do something.
Yes, you do, because it's costing you a
Right.
fortune every month.
So, yeah, I'm not debating what we're doing is okay or not, I'm just saying,
This is a way to take a little of the sting off of
Yeah.
that monthly.
yeah, we just need to figure it out by the end of the
Did
school year.
did we get a second for Dr. Flannery's motion?
I did, yes,
Okay,
Yeah.
no. All right. Any
Sorry.
further discussion on his motion, which was to negotiate with the janitorial company to provide services at the old Boones Creek Elementary?
Pending agreement with the county and city.
If there's no more discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Mr. Fleeter, you had some thoughts on reporting and just,
Yeah, you know, Brad, I'd like to see if we could on the general fund and not so much a federal fund, because most of that's going into, you know, prioritized services, but like you said on that 7,200 line, 499, the other. It'd be nice, and some of those are broke down to where it is per school. But at the end, you know, even maybe a whole new paper, say, like the sales tax, where we could see whatever school's costing that month and have a running list. You know, could we do that, do you think?
You know, I just.
And
have to-
maintenance?
I'd have to just set some things up.
Okay.
And what would maintenance go?
Well, like, we see, you know, Lowe's, Home Depot, you know, Amazon, Co-op, all these things. It'd be nice to know though what school that was attached to. That way we could see what it's costing to operate these schools, really, besides the power bill, water bill, and things like that nature. We could actually see, you know, if we're having to spend $10,000 a month, say at Daniel Boone. I mean, we'd know, is it capable of doing that?
I can get a board together. It will be, maybe a month or so.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Just, because we're gonna have to add some chart of accounts, kind of like we've got this other expense line items broke down, if you're saying maintenance. And, I'll go in there and add the accounts, but me and Paul will need to really look at a few of those line items and see, make sure we capture which line items everything's going into, because it's not just one line item.
No.
It's seven.
Right.
So we would have to break each line item down like some of the others are. And then each purchase order that comes through would then need to be coded to the best of our abilities. Now, the challenge will be, like maintenance, like I'm just gonna use paint for an example. Let's say they buy 1,000 gallons of paint, and that's for stock purposes. So right now, it's just going into the general maintenance line, and it's going to sit in the warehouse until it's needed.
Right.
A challenge will be allocating that out.
Well, can we do, if it's for all the schools, can we just divide it by, what, 14 and come out?
I
with that?
could, so that's an
Anything
idea.
stock.
I could use student enrollment to do that. That's one measuring point. So for example, if I have a $5,000 general expense, I could divide that out based on the percentages. Like if one school has 500 students,
That'd be
out of
better.
8,000, I could use a percentage. If you're wanting me to
Yeah.
do something
No,
like
that would be
that.
better.
It wouldn't be
That way-
exact, but if
Or
we give
square
you.
footage.
Yeah, square footage
Well,
is
Square footage would be
better.
better if you're, I mean, stuff like that.
Because you got some
Yeah,
schools
yeah.
operating at 80% and others at 100%. So square footage is a real easy metric to
Yeah.
have in the spreadsheet.
So I could just take the percentage of square footage for all the buildings, I guess is what we're
Yes,
saying.
and by student. I mean, once you get a spreadsheet built, I mean, you can just keep adding variables.
I mean, anything that's just a inventory that we have, 10,000, like I said, paint, 10,000 gallons of paint in the warehouse.
Yeah.
Let's just divide it up for, but anything that's used, like all day they worked at David Crockett on the boiler, he used to, they worked a lot on it. All those expenses, like that work order, and I don't know, I'm speaking kind of away from my job, or more towards my job, but like every work order is wrote against a job, piece of equipment. End of the year, we pull up all the equipment, and we can see what you spent the money on last year. Is our work order system like that?
Not with labor costs.
I mean, no, like paper, like any kind of purchase order, they wrote against a,
I think Philip tried to get us to buy him one, but
secretary.
Well, work order, when we were looking at the ESG.
Yeah.
No.
So labor, now I can bust labor costs down into student employees that are assigned per building. But with maintenance, it's a little different because they're just under the maintenance umbrella. I don't know where those people are. I mean,
Well, maybe just leave the labor out of it, but any kind of materials, let's try to really focus on where those materials are going. And that way we can see. Also too, 2 years ago, you brought up, maybe it was last year, you brought us a paper, what it was costing to operate each school. We have that again during our,
I've actually
Well,
got to.
what we've got a retreat and a planning, our strategic planning meeting coming up in 3 weeks? I think that would be for
Yeah.
our FY 20, our June 30 numbers.
Yeah.
That's on our list.
Is that on your?
So you want me to have it at our retreat then?
I
Just
definitely
that.
think we need
Saying-
that.
Not the-
Last year's, yeah.
not the general fund, but I don't, as far as the cutouts on them,
Pardon me?
the new reporting, just make it ready for next month. Could we do that?
Oh, yeah, well, I think that's part of it, but I do think that we ought to have our last year, our June 30, 2020 numbers.
Yeah, the-
Brad's got it broken down to some
I
extent
have
by
to,
size.
I have to finish it. The state's not asked for it yet. We don't know if they're going to this year because of COVID, but I'm
Yeah.
still doing it myself. And what you're talking to cost per school, that was a meeting with Mr. Day where we did take the total cost broke down and then we used the student enrollment, average revenue per student. Now, this is not weighted, and I say that because certain space, if you're heavier sped at one school, the reality is those students are weighted a little heavier in funding. We didn't do that. We just took the same, we just took an average revenue per student across the board, applied the revenue amount to each school based on how many students there were, and then applied the expenses and came up with a profit and loss per school basis is what I think you're referring to. And that can be done again. That's not a problem. So the board retreat, I can definitely have that done. It will take a month or two to really break all the maintenance down because because there's a lot of purchase orders that are already out there
Right.
that are not already earmarked. So it might take, am I accurate in saying 60 days is what I was going to say, once we get it set up in
I mean, you gotta
Skyward.
get whoever's writing those purchase orders or documentation to start getting them to put on what school it's going to.
Now, we can already bust a lot of this down, but for that one component, it's probably going to be about a 60-day process to.
I mean, if 90's better, I mean, I'm not trying to throw a curveball to you, but it'd just be better if we could see it.
What I will need, Dr. Flannery, is I guess I'll request from Philip and I'll just need the actual square footage of all of our buildings.
I've got that in this
Okay,
notebook.
you've already got it,
Yeah.
great. And I can easily, anything that's not earmarked, then I can apply that metric.
Okay.
Another metric is the size of the campus itself, because we mow 350 acres. And at Crockett especially, that's huge. It's over twice the size of Boone.
Mr.
And
Flynn,
there's a
One
lot
more
of different
question.
ways to look at this, and all of them valid.
the amount of, I'd like to know the amount we're saving, because the board didn't go to summer long. We're not gonna go to Nashville for the fall convention, but we're also not doing a lot of professional development that we've been traveling around here and there. Could we see what the financial impact of that is, what savings we've seen?
Even Paul's actually looked at that. On that component, around 50,000 is our estimate.
Okay.
Now, fuel savings, we think in the month of August, and for half of the month of September, we probably realized about another 50K in fuel savings. So all in all, fuel savings plus our estimated savings in conferences that are not going to happen, professional development, and this is only an estimate, we're thinking total about $100K.
Can you all come back, could you have that more, what you've all put aside for that next month?
Brad?
More,
Was that all general fund, your estimate there?
Yes.
There's a whole lot more on the federal side too.
Yeah.
well,
And that's
we
where
can't spend that money, can we?
Right, we can't. So yeah. So
Not
the
really.
truth is-
I mean, on the general fund side, we may have $100K that's not, that's really appropriated that we may not be using anymore, correct?
A lot of it's on the school board itself. Last year
Right.
alone, at Opryland Hotel, I saw the invoice, it was $10,000 for one trip.
For the room, for the room. I knew we were saving some money, but
We
I
still
just,
have to do, like, they're still sending us, but we still have to do something for our professional development.
What about, Dr. Flannery, though? I mean, we've got the savings on that side, but do we anticipate any additional cost from an instructional standpoint with, as we come back to being in school with teachers self-quarantining and having to use more substitutes or additional teachers, or?
We did not budget any more money for subs. We didn't budget any more money for classroom supplies. And that could be shifted in a hurry.
That's what,
I mean, general fund money's fungible.
yeah.
And I will say that we're getting a double subcharge for in certain situations. Because now that school's back in session, when a teacher's out, there's students in the classroom and then there's virtual. Where regular sub can handle those students in the classroom. They cannot handle the virtual. So we have to have another teacher that you approve. So there are cases where we're getting double hit for subs where we wasn't in last year. It's just a unique situation.
Right.
However long this combination of virtual and classroom lasts, we are getting hit double charged on
That's
subs.
negligible right now, but
Right
it
now.
could skyrocket.
Yeah, if it goes on several months, then that could make that could amount to tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
It could.
I just thought the one-time savings, I mean, it obviously can't have something that's gonna be a recurring cost, but I was hoping it was gonna be significant.
But Dr. Flannery, going forward, what happens when we're back in school full throttle and we have teachers who may have been exposed but haven't tested positive yet, who are, I guess I call it self-isolation or quarantine?
It will be forced quarantine by the health department.
Okay, so that takes them out of the productivity line.
Not
In other words,
necessarily.
they can't, I mean, it's not like them being sick with the flu and can't get up. They just can't be at school.
They're gonna be at home interacting with their kids will be in the classroom, the teachers will be at home, and there'll be
Okay.
a sub
Okay.
physically in the room. There's your double dipping.
Okay, got you.
Is that thing on? We got 142 people in quarantine right now. So it's gonna be a thing, particularly when we go full blown on October the 12th. We're gonna have quite a bit of that. Now, the board has given me authority to pull people back in off quarantine. I'm not crazy.
Yeah.
I'm not doing it.
Right,
So I'd rather spend $70 a day on a sub as risk making a whole school sick.
right. But the quarantine teacher's still able to deliver some content.
If they're isolated, that means they're sick. Can't do a thing with
Right.
them. If they're quarantined, that just means the health department says, you got to stay home for how many days. We can put them to work. Most of them want to work in.
Gotcha.
Not all of them.
Okay. Anything else, anything financially that we touched on? These costs and the school stuff for the retreat. Anything else from a financial aspect that y'all
just make sure I didn't miss, so each month we're wanting a cost per school breakdown monthly. And then we're wanting to drill into the maintenance expense, to drill that down more on the cost per school. Did I miss anything else with those two things?
Anything in your utilities.
That's
Yeah.
already,
Yeah,
I've already
any
got
of the
that.
stuff you
Yeah, I've
already-
already got utilities.
And can we have it broke down on like Gray Elementary, utilities X, maintenance X, and then whatever, if, you know what I'm saying, if there's anything that, I mean, try to make it simple, but
Yeah.
where we can understand it too.
Yeah, we'll just, I'll just break it down by classification. The final report you'll see will be something I will invent. I mean, I already have a template that I mainly do, but I'll have to modify it a little bit. That'll be something where I'll have a few different reports that I bring together, and I'll have to create a master report that you'll actually see.
Sorry, Paul.
It's just typing in a code, brother, that's all it is.
I can't get
Just
you
typing
to
in
come
a
no
code.
closer now, you done stopped.
Typing in a code.
All will type it in, and then I'll pull it together.
That's all it is.
Committee, anything else? Hearing none, we are adjourned.